Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands
one
one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, good evening. Welcome to a regular meeting of the Silverton Board of Trustees. It is April 10th. The time is 7:02 p.m. and I call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Along with us tonight.
Here.
Trustee Harper.
Here.
Trustee Buren.
Here.
Trustee George.
Yeah, here.
Mayor Ryan.
Here.
And Mayor Burns.
Here.
We have seven trustees.
Thank you very much. Do we have any revisions to this evening's agenda?
We do. Staff is requesting to remove agenda item 4B, the pass-through policy ordinance from this agenda and move it to the April 24th meeting since we did not get the notice published in the paper 10 days in advance according to chapter 16(1).
Got it. Great. Any other revisions?
That's all.
Perfect. All right, we'll now open the meeting for public comment. We'll start with in-person comment and then move to Zoom comments. Go ahead and click the raise hand button if you're on Zoom so we can have you in the queue. Before you begin speaking, please introduce yourself and we'll time 3 minutes. Anyone in-house care to comment? Okay, anyone on Zoom? I see none at this time, so we'll close public comment and begin the rest of our agenda, which is item 3A, which is the San Miguel Power Association presentation.
And Matt, can you promote Jeremy Fox as well to panelists? All right, Terry and Jeremy, you guys should be able to share your screen or chat it up.
All right. Well, we're here fresh off of the avalanche. We made it over Red Mountain and got stuck. There's 2 of them over there now. We could see 2 avalanches. So we took photos. The first one's probably 30, 40 feet high. So Jeremy and I are both here and we're going to start sharing the screen. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Oops.
Thank you for joining us. I'm glad that we're unaffected besides needing to zoom in.
Let me share screen.
Just one more.
Hang on, sorry, technical difficulties.
Pick the right screen here and we will get started.
Can you see our screen?
Here we go. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for having us tonight. I'm Jeremy Fox. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for San Miguel Power. And of course, Terry Schuyler is here, our Chief, our Key Accounts Executive. Thank you for having us. We also have in the audience, I believe, Brad Zaborski, our CEO, and probably in the crowd there, we have our board member, Terry Rhodes. Thank you, Terry, for being there. He really wanted to make sure that we were able to approach you guys tonight and talk a little bit about some of the challenges and the ways we can keep the lights on in Silverton and San Juan County. And so we're going to go through several different things tonight. One is going to be a general overview of how power is delivered to the town of Silverton and San Juan County. Talk about some of the recent outages that you guys have experienced, and then as well as some other options that we hope can be a partner with Silverton and San Miguel or San Juan County, excuse me, as we move forward and looking at local resilience. So first of all, as I said, we're going to start with looking at how power is delivered to Silverton. And apologize 1 second here. We've got a little.
Let's hit the arrow. There we go.
There we go. All right. So power is transmitted from transmission lines from over what's serving Silverton, the transmission system that goes over from Burr Bridge substation up on 550, and we're going to show you a better example of that here shortly. And that's owned by Tri-State on our system. It runs into a distribution substation where that transmission voltage is then lowered down to a distribution voltage. As some of you may know, some may not, San Miguel Power is a member-owned rural electric cooperative that's serving you. And we are a part of a larger cooperative, which is Tri-State Generation and Transmission. And they handle all of the transmission that comes into our substations on all of our system. And then we take that voltage and it's distributed out on the lines that you see in town. It's the distribution lines, and those go out to different areas, and then radio lines go out to your individual homes, which is then metered and all the way down to the light switch and the receptacles in your home. As I stated, Tri-State is the owner of the transmission system that's supplied to San Miguel Power via a loop transmission system, which are the high voltage lines. As you can see on the right, there's a brief description here. The purple line is actually the transmission system that comes in from Borough Bridge substation, which is up off right at Overpass and 550, follows down through to town, generally following 550, and then it loops around all the way back down into Durango as part of a larger transmission loop. If you can tell, that transmission loop right at the corner of town of Silverton goes in a northeasterly direction through town and serves the distribution substation that is called Cement Creek. And then at that substation is where San Miguel Power takes over ownership of the distribution system that feeds out to your homes and businesses.
Real quick, the point of discussing the fact that the transmission is a loop means that power comes to Silverton from two different directions. So if for some reason the feed from the Borough Bridge is knocked out by an avalanche, by the way, the avalanche we saw was just north of the Borough Bridge sub today, then we can reroute power from Durango and vice versa. So that's the advantage of a loop transmission.
We were going to try to incorporate a Google Earth slide here. Will that work?
Try. You have to
Nope.
go to the share screen or hit control and try it.
And
Put your mouse on there, hit control. And this one here.
it's okay. We don't have to do it.
It's gonna stop.
We're going to switch to a different screen right quick. I apologize for the technical difficulties. We were hoping to be there in person tonight.
Then you have to show them.
Let's just go back to this.
We had a nice three-dimensional Google Earth flyby that we were going to show you, but I'm having trouble.
So just to reiterate the existing picture here, this is your transmission line coming down through distribution system over in the area of Silverton. It goes out to the ski area and then also back into the Howardsville, Eureka area from the Cement Creek substation. Okay, now I'm not advancing. There we go. So, as you know, Silverton is a unique area and outages do happen. Whenever working with Tri-State and when we have an outage on the system, typically we look at different priorities of the system. Tri-State looks at the transmission system, then the substations, and from the substations, San Miguel Power takes over, as we said before, and we take care of the distribution lines. Now, extreme weather conditions can cause outages, as you're aware. Also, many other things, avalanches, high winds, or we can also have smaller outages in town, whether it be an equipment failure, blown fuses on transformers, accidents from a vehicle hitting the power lines or a piece of equipment. Rest assured, you know, whenever there is an outage, San Miguel Power works with a 24-hour, 365-day-a-year dispatch center. When you lose power, be assured that we are working as quickly as we possibly can to get your lights back on. Depending on the situation, there can be some different options. One data point that I failed to mention here that's interesting, Climate Central data shows that power outages nationwide due to the increasing extreme weather have increased nearly 64% in the last decade of the last 10 years. And we've seen that across our system with different weather challenges that we've seen in just the last few years. But I thought that was an interesting statistic to share with you tonight. Of course, this year, as Silverton knows, the snowpocalypse, as they say, shelter in place, has been quite the year for Silverton and the snowpack. The picture on the left there is actually part of the Cement Creek substation on one of the outages. If you notice, over one of those fuses actually opened up. That was one of the issues for one of the outages that we'll get into in just a moment and talk more in detail of what took place. So of the recent power outages that have happened in the last couple months, Silverton has seen some significant outages at the substation level. On February 22nd, if you may recall, was a unique day in Silverton. It was whiteout conditions and both of the roads were closed. Luckily, San Miguel Power had the forethought to send an extra person over into Silverton before the road closure happened. Unfortunately, there was a fault on the system that went back into the substation, and each substation has protective equipment in that substation to protect the transformer in the substation. It just works just like a fuse would in, say, your car or your house or overloaded circuit breaker. Same scenario, just at a much higher voltage. On this particular day, on February the 22nd, some of the fuses operated on the transformer. And if you recall, some of those substation assets are on the transmission side or belong to Tri-State. Unfortunately, both of the road passes were closed and Tri-State personnel were not able to get into Silverton. So San Miguel Power crews worked with our dispatch and Tri-State dispatch to reservice the transformer, or the fuses rather, and we're able to get you back on. Now, I realize this outage took several hours to happen, but you have to understand many things took place to get that back on. On March the 12th, a different day, different time. This was a sunny day in Silverton. And we had a call into dispatch from emergency personnel that some snow had slid off the Avon Hotel and took down a line, broken a pole. At this particular time, one of the passes was also closed due to some avalanche situations that were happening that day. And for safety reasons, our dispatch control turned that line off. And that's a safety protocol we sometimes do if there's a danger to the public. Luckily, we were able to get a CDOT escort over for it. As soon as our line crews got into town, we were able to assess the situation and get power on for the majority of the town at that time. On April the 3rd, another heavy snow day with 80 mile per hour wind gusts. A similar situation happened with the transformer and the substation on the Tri-State substation that happened on February the 22nd. On this day, we were able to get, or Tri-State was able to get their personnel in and refuse the protection devices on the transformer, as well as San Miguel Power personnel there to help get that back on. If you notice the graph chart over on the right here, this is a chart that we look at that shows the actions of the substation at a whole level for the town and the other circuits. You can see the three long lines here going down to near zero. Those are the three outages that we're referring to. And you may ask the question why there's another long line going back up. One of the things you may see in a power restoration is that when the power comes back on, we have to slowly bring that power back on. For example, when the power's coming back on, your lights may be on and your neighbors be off. And that's all because of a sequencing event we have to do for the transformer. So there's not heavy loading on that transformer when we bring that load back on. So each one of these events, you can see an equal reaction when the power pops back on these three dates, just to show you an illustration of that. The timestamps up on the upper right here, I'd like to note that 2023 has been off to a snowy start, snowpocalypse of Silverton, as we've seen. And we talked about reliability for Silverton and San Juan County. I know we had an issue in 2021 where we had a tri-state outage as well. And in 2022, there was no outage on the substation. For the whole year, there was 100% uptime. And in 2021, even with the outage we had at the time, there's still 99.8% of the time that we didn't have any issues on the main system for the town of Silverton. One of the questions was, how often do power outages occur in other communities? Is Silverton by themselves? Are there other situations on our system where we have outages? And the point is, you're not alone, and neither are we. Rico and Ophir are both single radial feeders, very similar to Silverton's situation. The risk. I'm sorry, was there a question?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was just seeing if we had that slide in our packet.
No, you don't. We made this one. Jim had asked.
Okay, thank you.
Examples of other
Yeah,
outages.
you may see a couple of slides we've added in. We'll be happy to send those to you when we're finished here. But this just give you an example of other areas that are experiencing similar situations. The town of Rico, as you can see, an outage history there. There's that line is fed on a distribution feeder that is very long. And actually the picture here of the line going out toward Rico. Lots of avalanche areas and tree options that can cause that line to go.
And no loop.
And also there, they don't have a transmission loop. And that's one of the areas that are very similar, except they don't have the transmission loop. Ophir is another area where they have a lot of outages due to avalanche. As you can see here in this illustration on the right, each one of these yellow areas is a avalanche chute, and we did have an outage there due to several avalanches this winter and all the snow. And then there's areas such as Nucla. Now their area is likely to not have as long of a duration of outage just because of location. And all of our other areas experience outages as well. Last night, there was an outage in Telluride. All of Telluride and Mountain Village were out for about 3 hours. Ironically, that came from a beaver chewing a tree and falling into the line and down valley and causing the outage, and it took a while for us to get there to restore it. So
There's 3 more outages this afternoon.
yeah, outages are pretty common, especially during this time of year. We've had an epic year for climate conditions across our system. We were also asked to bring up just a kind of a side note slide here, some updates on the Red Mountain Electrical Reliability and Broadband Improvement Project. I may have spoken with you folks a couple of years ago on this project and what it means for the region and the system. The Red Mountain line was built nearly 100 years ago. It provides a backup power to Uray and to Ridgeway, and it goes north of that Burbridge substation we were talking about. This particular line does not back up Silverton. It's a backup line for Ridgeway and Uray areas. One thing this line does include in the rebuild is a broadband pathway, middle mile pathway from Uray all the way over to Burbridge, nearly to Silverton. Phase 1 of this was to do the vegetation work that we finished up last year and the year before. We did some work there. The actual rebuild of this project has been delayed somewhat because of supply costs and availability issues. And the ask was if we were going to do any more road closures associated with this project. This summer, we're planning to do some access roads to some pole locations. I don't anticipate any major road closures at all for that. There may be a quick hold to move some equipment across the road, if that might be. When we are bidding out the construction piece of a section of this line this fall to determine whether or not we'll move forward with that in 2024. If we do in 2024, there may be some road closures associated with that, but as the engineering and planning move forward, we will be certainly working with you guys on what makes the most sense for both parties. And again, when this line is rebuilt, it would include the middle mile fiber to Burbridge substation, which is a major pathway getting extra fiber, redundant fiber over towards Silverton. And one of the things we wanted to move into is, taking personal responsibility for resiliency. Our board of directors has set several strategic objectives, and one of them is to have a resilient system, focusing on wildfire mitigation and other system improvements, including improvements to our substations, improvement to our distribution system. These are a few snippets of things off of our website about power outages, our outage center, our, Facebook is always a great place to check for updates. If you're following Facebook when an outage occurs to get updates of where we are and what we're doing. As well as some other links there to outage information on our San Miguel Power website.
Just before we leave that, so we have on our homepage, there'll be a scrolling banner. If there's an outage, it's kind of small right now, but you can still see it because it's moving. And it'll direct you to high level information of the outage. But there's also a box at the top of the website called the Outage Center. And if you click on that, you get this middle image with the yellow bar, which gives you specifics on the outage and any updates. And we update that information every hour. And then if you scroll down, which most people don't know to do, there's a lot of this public information about how to manage the outage from your end, from the user end in town, including a nice graphic or a white paper on how to properly use a generator during a power outage, how to be safe and not plugging it into your circuits so that if the power comes on, the generator is not talking to the grid and creates a fire. So there's a fair amount of information that I encourage everybody to access by clicking on the Outage Center, whether it's during an outage or not.
So increasing reliability and resiliency in the future, what are we doing, right? That's the question. Each outage, we always go back and do a forensic analysis on what the causes were, especially on repeated outages that may be similar in cause. We work with Tri-State on transmission issues. One of the things that is planned for the Cement Creek substation is we're doing some work this summer to expand the footprint of that substation so it can allow for a mobile transformer to get in there if we need to, and allow some maintenance to be done on the transformer in the substation as well as other items. We also look at the local distribution system. How do we prevent unexpected weather-related disruptions, specific remedies? For example, this Thursday, we're scheduled to have some linemen. You'll see some work going on next to the Cement Creek substation on the circuits going out of there, installing some spacers in between the conductors. Some of the winds that we experienced over the last month have been pretty exponential. We're going to put in some spacers in between some of those structures to hopefully prevent that from happening again. We also explore those logistics of bringing in mobile substations, if, for example, that was needed, how those would get over those mountain passes, how long does it take to transport, where are they stationed, when would it be necessary? That would only be necessary if the transformer were to fail. I can assure you that that transformer is in good shape, and we're looking at other options within the substation to help speed up recovery if it ever were to experience a fault, and which would require us to slowly bring it back to life, if they will. And I'm going to let Terry talk some more on some exploring for some possible microgrid funding and application potential.
So we're going to switch gears a little bit in terms of some of the methods we at San Miguel Power and you as a community can engage in, primarily based on this once in a lifetime opportunity for funding, both federal funding, state funding. There's an enormous amount of funding opportunities available to us, and we're slowly trying to explore those, look at how we can manage those and where they would make sense in our system. But we want to partner with, our various communities to look at resiliency as a larger issue. And that can mean not just electrical resiliency, but could be mean resiliency for food, for gas or propane, for medical resiliency. During one of those outages, your ambulance was stuck in Durango as well. So having a resiliency plan for the community is something that there is some near-term funding available for, and we'd like to work with you guys on that, as well as the possibility of looking at a microgrid that could be a source of backup for the entire community, although that's a much larger takedown. But where this began for us is we worked with San Miguel County on their sheriff's offices, helped them write a DOLA grant. They got $1.1 million and ended up using a portion of that to put in 3 separate small, what we call behind the meter microgrids to back up critical circuits in their emergency operations center, at the actual dispatch center, in the Ilium office, as well as the sheriff's offices out in Norwood. And in the case of the Ilium offices, the backup actually backed up not only all of the equipment in the dispatch center, their IT, their servers, their radios, but the locks on the jails, which was they considered a critical load. You can see here that the solar on the left, that bar graph, also serves to offset the electrical consumption during the course of the year through our net metering program. So the microgrids serve multiple purposes. They can offset the use of the facility by producing solar energy during the day, and then there's a battery bank that immediately picks up the critical load circuits as identified by the facilities. And then, of course, the solar is available during an extended outage. Should we have an outage that lasts for days or weeks even, God forbid, the solar would be available to recharge the battery bank and provide extended coverage to these critical loads. Now, mind you that the critical loads are a subset of the loads in the building. There is a generator you can see in the lower right-hand corner that does come on to power the entire building, but generators are mechanical devices. They're prone to failure. And in fact, in the case of the three microgrid systems that we worked with San Miguel County on, during the commissioning, the generators kept failing. They would fail to operate. They had a problem with the gas valves, and they continue to have problems. And we've experienced that here at our own offices with a generator failing to operate when it's critical. So the battery bank in this case effectively backs up the generator. So it's a redundant form of resiliency. So that particular project was used as an example, and our CEO Brad gave a presentation in front of the State House to help support a bill, this Colorado Bill 221013, which provided funding for a new program called Microgrids for Community Resiliency. And the funding for this program is only available to rural electric co-ops like us and municipally owned utilities, with the explicit purpose of looking at community-wide resiliency, especially in rural communities. So to be eligible for this funding, you need to be a rural community, which all of our communities are, need to experience a variety of different risk factors or vulnerabilities, some of which are extreme weather, socioeconomic, various injustices or vulnerabilities associated with that, infrastructure risks and vulnerabilities. Again, Silverton is well positioned to check all these boxes. In particular, the microgrids need to focus on resiliency for specific community anchor institutions, schools, libraries, hospitals, healthcare facilities, law enforcement, medical, government offices, town offices, marginalized community services. Again, this is Silverton in a nutshell, as it is with many of our communities. And there's a higher degree of probability you'll get the funding if it includes a non-fossil fuel-based component such as solar. So with all of that in mind, there's two particular funding pots that have been made available this year. The first is for a planning grant. I'll go into more detail about that in a moment, but the second one, which hasn't been released yet, will be approximately $4 to $5 million handed out in up to $1 million increments for actual large scale microgrids. And this is something that we're going to focus on. In fact, we've put in for 4 planning grants as of last week, where the deadline was cut off to apply for the planning grants. These can be stacked with other grants like the direct pay, or which used to be the investment tax credit. The 30% was allowed for solar and battery systems. No longer is it required that there be a credit based on your tax appetite. Now they're making it a direct payment, which means nonprofits such as San Miguel Power, such as the municipalities, can apply directly for this fund, which takes a 30% haircut right off the top. So separate from this state funding, which would power up or provide up to 66% of the cost of the project, the 30% comes right off the top, as well as a number of other grants that we're just beginning to explore. The planning grant this round was dedicated for up to $400,000 and $36,000 or less increments for various scopes of a planning process. And some of those are outlined here in the various colors. But it also includes the ability, as the very last bullet suggests, to integrate and incorporate supplemental plans. We can write San Miguel Power has to be the author of this, using you, Silverton or San Juan County, as the partner in applying for money just to help to put together a resiliency plan. Doesn't have to be specific to a given application of hardware. It can just be to help put together a resiliency plan. And we're offering to work with you to apply for this money in the next round, which is going to be about this time next year. and giving you a heads up that, there is a matching component, a 33%, 25% matching for this planning grant, which is, caps out at about 12K. So this is something we're going to highly encourage you guys to look at, and we'll partner with you in this. One of the things that they're focused on is the idea of resilience hubs. And this is a graphic or a series of graphics from a Rocky Mountain Institute paper on what is a resilience hub. And in a nutshell, a resilience hub is an emergency shelter. So identifying one or more locations in town where we can put in a microgrid or behind the meter microgrid that can serve as a gathering place in the event of extreme weather or road closures, on and on, all the various things that would make this useful to the community. You could have, we're working on one for the town of Ridgeway's new Space to Create building. They have a community center, and we're going to help write a grant for a small microgrid for that, whereby this is a affordable housing project with 30 residents, 30 units. The residents during a power outage can come down and they'll have charging bars, where people can plug in their cell phones or their laptops or iPads and, stay in touch with whatever the emergency might be. So this is something, again, that I encourage Silverton, San Juan County to look at, the idea of identifying a location for and then designing this idea of a resilience hub that we can then apply for funding for. And that's all we have. I do have a handful of other slides that are in your package that just go into more detail. This one in particular shows the 4 planning grants that we just recently applied for. And real quickly, I'm just going to show you 2 of them. One is for the entire town of Rico, and the other is for the entire town of Ophir. Back when Jeremy was presenting this, these are radial feeders, meaning there is no other way to bring power into the town other than through the actual point from our transmission to the distribution system in town. So looking at a large battery bank and a solar system that could provide 4 to 6 hours of battery backup with the solar, that then becomes a community solar garden. Then that solar is available later on to provide additional charging to the batteries in the case of an extended outage. So this may be something that down the road we want to look at Silverton as a possible location for a large community microgrid. Putting it in perspective, there's 195 residents in Ophir, 340 in Rico. Silverton has 765 electric meters, so it's be a much larger project than the ones we've identified here. And then we're also looking at doing the same behind the meter small microgrid systems for each of our main headquarters offices to back up our critical outage communication. We have you can kind of see it here in this photo, that we have a 350 kilowatt generator that when we had an outage actually two Labor Days ago, the power went out to the building, the generator fired up, but it tripped its own breaker, failed to power the building. And for an hour and a half, we were out of all of our outage communications. Nobody could call in to report the outage. We couldn't make updates to Facebook or our website. We were basically in the dark. So we're going to be using our own little solar system here in the case of Ridgeway, and putting in a battery bank and powering up just our communication equipment, so that even if the generator fails, we have resiliency to our critical communications. And then we're going to look at part of the planning grant doing the same thing in our nuclear office. So that's the last slide here is just a point of interest. The Telluride School District has applied for a $750,000. They were awarded a $750,000 grant to put in a large microgrid system for the entire Telluride school campus. So this will serve as a resilience hub. It'll offset their electrical usage during the year based on net metering. And then we'll have a pretty robust 250 kilowatt hour storage system that would serve the resilience hub, as well as allow them to take some of the solar during the day, store it during the day, and then put it on the grid at night and help lower their demand bill. So it's a way of lowering their cost as well. So there's all this new grid edge technology is coming into the fore, and we're on top of it, and we encourage this. And it's going to be an exciting time with all this funding out there. So with that having been said, I don't think we have anything more to present. Would welcome any questions.
Well, thank you very, very much. To begin with, trustees, any comments or questions?
Yeah, Tyler George. So I appreciate you guys being here because, as you said, outages happen, but when they happen to us, unlike Ridgeway or Telluride or Rico, we can't. These recent outages, we haven't been able to leave either. So when we have, I also am the director of the ambulance. And so when we have vulnerable populations, people that have, electric oxygen reducers, things of that nature, and they can't use them, it's a real problem for us. And so I'm really excited to see what sort of options we have to make sure that if we do get that sort of double whammy of the roads closing and the electricity going out, how are we going to be able to, basically keep people alive at the end of the day? And so I'm excited to hear that there's a bunch of different grants out there. I am curious, you said that we're going to need to write those grants in concert with you all, and it sounds like next year might be the earliest that we'll be able to apply for sort of either a redundancy microgrid grant. Is that correct?
Just that one particular state fund.
Okay.
The community resiliency. There's other federal funding that we're just starting to explore that may be applicable and could be accessed sooner than that. But the planning grant, which is the first of the two state grants available, the window just closed for the planning grants last week. We scrambled to get a few of those proposals in, but we could start working with you now to develop the concepts for those so that we're not down to the last minute. And we have a pretty receptive audience with the state folks because our San Miguel County Sheriff's Office systems were to some extent considered the poster childs for this funding grant. So they're keenly aware of our unique circumstances, the isolation that we face with many of our communities. The last major outage we had in Rico, the road was just Silverton. The pass was closed from Lizard Head in one direction and from Dolores in the other. They were just as isolated, to a different degree, of course, but same basic concept. I think in the case of the medical situations that you're referring to, this would be an ideal candidate for looking at what we call the behind the meter small microgrids for individual facilities. And this could be whether it's the fire department, the town buildings, whether you establish a resilience hub using the school or some sort of a gathering place where we can ensure that there's always going to be power available, even in the case of an extended outage for medical purposes. So we definitely ought to start looking at those opportunities. And I'm happy to, you can use my contact and start working at assessing the situations and assessing the load and taking a look at, what's the scale and scope of the power system to be required to back those things up.
Sure. Thank you.
Generators are of course an option, but generators have trouble, right? They require fuel. If you run out of fuel, there's no powering that up. And of course they're mechanical, so they're subject to oil changes and failures. And
we have several buildings here that have backup generators that are supposed to act as sort of resiliency hubs. And many of those generators have not worked during any of our outages this year. So yeah, we're keenly aware of the shortcomings of generators. A real pain, if you ask me. But
is it the sewer or water treatment plant that has an older kind of janky, I think was a word I heard once described for the generator? So.
Yeah, the school has one, the ambulance association has one, but whether they're all working at one, they're never all working at the same time. And so, again, it's a big concern for us, especially when the pass is closed as well. And we're trying to figure out how to plug in oxygen concentrators and get heating for folks that may rely on electric. And if, again, if we can't transport them out of town, then we're really, really scrambling. So.
Well, we're happy to partner with you as best we can to start identifying these specifics as well as looking at the larger picture.
Thank you.
This is Dana Cranker. I really appreciate you guys sharing this and just responding. Again, I know we're all little communities, but all these little people here in this community matter. And like Tyler said, we all face some big issues when the power goes out. And so I think something that came up in our board discussion after one of the most recent outages was kind of having an MOU in place between Tri-State and SMPA for service on the transmission and the substation. And so that was kind of a question we had, is like, when we had someone from SMPA in town, our wonderful local lineman, but yet if the equipment is owned by Tri-State, do you guys have any possibility to fast track agreements or make sure that we don't have to do a lot of back and forth in the interim, so that if the roads are closed and we can't get Tri-State crews here, but there is someone with SMPA, that we have those agreements in place for that work to be done?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And we do have a good member relationship with Tri-State. However, many of the times when we're facing the exact same challenges that you guys are when the roads are closed. And Tri-State doing the same. I can't speak for them, but I do say we have a good working relationship, and their response time is I wouldn't necessarily call it extreme in most cases, depending on the situation. But as far as an MOU with Tri-State, we are a member of Tri-State, just like you're a member of San Miguel Power. So they do serve us in all of our in our transmission needs. We feel like we're getting adequate service for the most part in most locations. Yes, there are challenges with Silverton. We're aware of those. And we share in your concern with getting someone over there. I am happy to say that, most of our linemen are trained in a lot of that area and have been able to step in when other people were unable to attend, as they should.
And that's an interesting point, because we call it the high side, but the high voltage side of the substation, which is what receives the transmission, is a much higher voltage and requires a different level of training and certification than the distribution voltage. So we're working to get some of our personnel trained in the higher voltage stuff to do just with what you said, is to substitute in for Tri-State. They have their own testing protocol and their own safety protocols, which are different than what we use on the distribution side. So, we did have a pretty unique collaboration during, was it the 22nd, the February 22nd? Yeah. Where we were able to use our staff as surrogates for their staff, as long as they were on the radio instructing them exactly what to do. So it's almost like a surgeon doing surgery with a robot, that we're able to plug in that way.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Because again, we have our wonderful local lineman, Jeff Shea, and just having someone here, I think, is a huge asset, because we have these isolation challenges. But again, like you've said, making sure that the things that we need in place for some of these scenarios that are not quite that out of the ordinary with where we all live is really, I think, helpful for that redundancy, that we have not just the redundancy in the loop system, but redundancy in staffing here.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Happy to go into more detail if you like.
No questions for me. This is Jordan Bierma, but yeah, just thanks for bringing up the microgrid stuff. It's definitely been on our radar too. We've discussed previous times, but looking forward to that potential.
And microgrid is kind of a broad term. I mean, I have a microgrid at my house, meaning I have solar and battery at my house. So during the outage I mentioned that happened to our headquarter building, I only knew about it because my neighbor had come over to me and said, could I help him with his garage door? It wasn't opening. And it turns out he didn't have power, but I went over to my house across the street and I had power because I had solar and a battery backup. So I have a mini microgrid at my house, but so they can range from a battery and a solar system at a home all the way to a large battery bank solar system and also generators for a whole community scale system. So there's lots of room in the breadth of that definition.
I know we've heard a lot from oh, sorry, go ahead, Sally.
No, you go.
No, go ahead with your comment first.
Well, this is just a curiosity that Jordan's question and your response sparked for me. There are several houses in Silverton that have solar panels. Mine is actually one of them. But, in the case of a power outage, because those solar panels feed the grid, there isn't the capacity for it to exist as a microgrid. But is there a way for solar houses that have solar panels to build up that capacity or install a battery system that could become sort of like, before we have all of the grants and we establish, a community center as a microgrid, like, I wonder if we could just have sort of local residents beef up their capacity and then have particular homes in Silverton serve that role if they were willing, or even just, I don't know, for their own needs.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. You can add a battery system to an existing solar system. That's a newer technology. It didn't used to be the case. And as
Okay.
you learned, your solar system is useless in an outage because it requires being connected to the grid, and the battery acts like the buffer or the capacitor sort of. But yes, there is technologies like Tesla has a power wall. There's a distributor in Ridgeway that sells them. They can be used with or without a solar system. So you can use them independent. People can put in backup battery systems in their homes without a solar system. The solar.
Sure.
then
It's just
allows you to-
charging from the grid. Yeah.
Right. What's required in your home is what I did when I built my home is you isolate the loads that you call critical, that you want to maintain power to in one breaker panel that's right next to the other breaker panel. And during the outage, your main breaker panel goes dead, that the emergency panel gets powered by the battery bank or even a generator. You can plug a generator into your solar and your battery system. There's lots of ways to configure that. And we offer rebates. So San Miguel Power is seeing the need for this. And we have, I think it's a $500 rebate for a strictly battery system. If it's a battery system that ultimately we can dispatch, this is a new technology where we could, with your permission and with a special rate, reach in and grab the power or some portion of it out of your battery to help offset our peak load. So the technology is maturing very rapidly. And yes, you can add batteries to your solar. You can put a battery system in without solar. As you probably know, right now, your solar array is probably covered with snow. So it's not, in many cases, it's not going to be producing much during the winter. So a battery system without a solar is just a viable resiliency option as with a solar system. So yeah, we could look.
Wow.
A simple version of that is what you call a UPS system that some of the office computers have. They have a small battery and they're designed to keep your computer on typically for only 20 or 30 minutes. But that's effectively a battery backup system for a specific load. But we can make that larger and power a number of circuits with a larger battery bank like that. And some of them are attractive. Some of them look like, sexy devices that you hang on your wall like art. So they're really trying to appeal to the masses these days by designing, more user-friendly hardware. Sexy may be a little bit overkill, but
I'm selling it. I like it.
we see electrical equipment as sexy.
Sexy's back.
I guess since we've heard from some of the trustees, I know we have some of our Office of Emergency Management folks here, but while we have these gentlemen, was there any other questions that felt relevant from some of our other experts?
We didn't have any questions. We did, Jim Donovan, Office of Emergency Management. We just appreciate, we've got a good working relationship with San Miguel Power. They are very responsive when there is a power outage. So sometimes community may not see all the behind the scenes. And we just appreciate that. So I think what's really important with what Jeremy and Terry are talking about is there's basically two streams. We need to have community resiliency, so on the individual side, but then government resiliency. And that, I feel like our government infrastructure, both town and county, we really need to take a critical look at that, because it's honestly not acceptable on some of these power outages, the number of generators that have not worked. So we really need to take really this summer, take the time to really bump that up and make sure that that we can sustain a prolonged power outage.
Yeah, do an inventory of generators and how they work and what they can,
And inventory, and also routine testing. So we know on a sunny day, it's like, okay, the generator's working. And then we can rely when it's a really bad weather day, we can get these generators going. DG, you want to tell us anything else?
No, yeah, we're definitely here to support these gentlemen, and the level of communication that we received from SMP during all these outages. I think it was Terry who said, when he called Gloria, she answered with, well, hello, Terry. So that is definitely small town communications. It's not just OEM. They are actually in really good communication with Gloria and John Seitz and other folks. But one of the things that Terry and I discussed this week is that, you know, that is high mountain alpine living. And as our community continues to grow, we also need to embed in newbies that their own personal resiliency, right? And so just challenge this board and maybe government to take a look that as new developments come in, as new builds come in, what can we do out of the gates to incentivize, encourage, or maybe even demand some resiliencies if it's an apartment complex or condos or new communities to ensure that we are resilient independently outside of living on the grid. So I'm always saying, how do you live off the grid while you're on the grid? And life is pretty comfortable in 2023. And when the power goes out, thankfully this last one, it's like, everybody go to bed. Just go to bed. And when you wake up, you're going to have power. But we've experienced this a lot this year. And because summer's here and it's going to be nice and beautiful, let's not lose sight of the issues and the continued power issues that could potentially happen.
And you hit on a really good point, personal preparedness. I mean, everybody in Silverton, and for that matter, anywhere in our service territory, should have a couple days supply of food, should have good flashlights, should have a Coleman camp stove, heating water, you know, have firewood. How are you going to stay warm if the power's out for 3 days? How are you going to stay fed? How are you going to stay hydrated? All these things play into the, you know, personal responsibility. And like I said, you know, this planning grant money could be made available to look at creating resiliency plans down to that level. It doesn't have to just be focused on electricity. It can be focused on medical equipment and food supply and propane supply and firewood supply, all the things that are necessary to get you through an unexpected and these days unprecedented time. I mean, extreme weather, that example that Jeremy gave in that one slide of 64% in the last decade. So putting that into a different context, if we had 10 power outages 10 years ago, we have 16 now, just based on the change in weather. So which means we have to staff up more, we have to be more prepared, but that also means individual members, we call you members, customers, if you want, also have to take that into mind when you're creating your own personal preparedness. And adding batteries to your solar system, Sally.
Well, thank you guys very, very much. We appreciate all of your hard work and keeping us informed.
And hopefully the road will open up soon. That was a pretty good size out or slide that we saw over in the, what'd you say, it was Chattanooga?
Yeah, just above Chattanooga.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Well, thanks for the invite.
Still there.
Appreciate the opportunity to present and, you know, feel free to get in touch with us anytime.
Thank you very much.
All right. The next item on our agenda is new business item 4A, trustee board vacancy.
Right, so trustee Davis resigned on March 29th, and according to state statutes, the board has 60 days to fill his position, or else it triggers a special election. Since trustee Davis ran uncontested, I referred to the previous board vacancy procedure in 2021 for the process. The process for filling filling these positions is open for board interpretation. So I've proposed two timelines in the memo that I would like your feedback on how you would like us.
So one version is to effectively have Q&A and presentations if we choose to do that on May 8th and to appoint on May 8th, or to have the Q&A and presentations on May 8th and then to appoint at the following meeting on May 22nd.
Correct.
And also discussion as to whether or not we want to continue the same procedure as last time, which was to request a letter of intent and then have a 5-minute presentation followed by Q&A, kind of like a shortened version of the candidate night that happens during an election. And also whether or not we want to also include the public comment or Q&A. So I think it's important.
More transparent, the better. I like that.
Yeah, did you, I guess. The question is, I mean, do you find it helpful to have some time to think about it before appointing, or do you want to do it the same day? Or voting on the replacement?
Mhm.
So I wasn't clear, obviously I wasn't part of the last one, so I don't have any experience.
I think there's pros and cons for both. I think my personal preference would be to decide on the same evening and
Okay.
have the vacancy be for as short a period of time as possible. And start getting whoever the new person is up to speed as fast as possible. And I think May 8th is still, that's a month from now. So that still gives any candidate a good amount of time to wrap their head around the role and to think about why it's important to them. But I'm definitely open to hearing like alternative opinions about giving us 2 weeks to think about it.
What happens when we don't get any candidates?
I think we made this look pretty fun. I think we're gonna get flooded with candidates.
I hope so.
I like your optimism.
I'm optimistic.
So
Great job.
preferences between May 8th and May 22nd decision.
I prefer the 22nd.
Sometime in between.
So we interview on the 8th and then,
Get good feedback between everybody and all of us can communicate also with the public and the town. And I think it's best that way.
I don't feel very strongly about it.
I had a similar thought as Jim, just making sure we had some, if we have the opportunity to kind of design this process for the, since it's not an election, yeah, giving the public time to weigh in, I think is important. But I also, and then having public comment as the part of the Q&A, that's a new, that would be new to this process. And so I recognize that that's built in to the next round. And, if that creates the opportunity to sort of shorten the timeline, and that's what matters, then I can see that perspective too. But I was sort of thinking along the lines of Jim.
I withdraw my opinion.
I don't
22nd.
I don't have very strong feelings either way.
Well, yeah,
So,
don't withdraw your
yeah.
opinion. I don't have strong feelings either way. Other than that, I think it's helpful to have the Q&A. That's good. I think the letter is important, and I think the public input is important.
Would the letter be part of like a public packet? Beforehand?
Yeah.
It would be
It was
transparent.
previously.
Yeah.
The only
Yeah, I
thing we didn't have before is what require, if there's a certain set of requirements for that letter. Is that what you noted, I think, Gloria, in the memo?
Yeah, that's what I couldn't find, is if you had established any kind of parameters for that letter of interest.
In the past, we haven't, but I don't know that that's a terrible, I think it'd be a good idea to provide suggestions about what's included, but not necessarily requirements. Because that also helps to see seriously care, forget the 3-sentence, I'm really interested, thanks so much. Compared to the 2-page, thoughtful, that helps us filter.
But I don't think we need it to be much longer than 2 pages.
No.
Limit to 2 pages.
That means they're too eager.
Providing a short, if we provide guidance, I think providing kind of suggestions of what's important for us to hear in order to make a decision would be helpful, but I don't think it's necessary. It's more work on you guys.
Yeah, I guess my question is, are we brainstorming those suggestions right now or bringing them back?
I think we kind of would need to give direction today so that people can apply in the next 2 weeks.
We do hope to meet the paper's deadline tomorrow to get this into the paper.
Yeah.
I don't think that's, I think someone who's interested in the job can discern what information they probably need to put in their letter. And it seems like sort of an undue burden on staff between now and tomorrow.
Leave it open.
Yeah.
Awesome. So letters,
Letter of intent and
letter of intent, a presentation, a 5-minute presentation on May 8th by each candidate,
Mhm.
assuming it's not like 100 candidates. We'll revise if we get overwhelmed. All these letters of intent will be in the packet for May 8th, so everybody will get a chance to see that publicly. And then we'll have a trustee Q&A and a public comment. Do we want to do the public comment ahead of the trustee Q&A? So we have public input to
Mhm.
weigh into our Q&A or
No.
the other order? Comment last.
You have a Q&A between each candidate.
Guess it depends how many.
Do they get to ask direct questions?
Hey, all right. I guess each candidate.
wait, so
Let's just assume 5 candidates. Each one would do 5. Well, I think we only had. Oh, and Jeff, did you run?
there's 4 of us, I
Okay.
think at least. And the I think it started with public comment at the beginning of the meeting
Mhm.
about whichever candidates. And then we spoke for 5 minutes and then there was a individual Q&A after everybody had made their statement
With the board.
with the board, and then closing public comment for anybody that wanted to add any final.
Cool.
Open and closing public comment for the.
But yeah, but that was just part of the meeting, right? So they just
Got it.
Right.
people were like, we're going to comment on this candidate at the beginning and at the end.
Okay, so regular open
remember.
comment at the beginning of the meeting, not necessarily about the candidates, but people can obviously weigh in there.
Yeah.
Then presentation by a candidate, Q&A with that candidate, then next, same format, and then public comment again at the end of the Q&As. In addition to the closing meeting public comment.
Oh, I don't know if I think it was just the regular opening and closing meeting public comments, and people made comments on candidates on those. I don't think there was a special public comment for it, but I mean,
I
we
think
could
that's
have one.
right. I think you're right, Tyler, but I like the idea of having a special public comment to end the.
And we've been doing it for other topics now as well anyway, right? We're gonna have if it's an important topic, we're gonna have a special public comment in the middle of the meeting. So this seems like something that we should probably allow that.
Okay. So in addition to all the regular meeting public comments, we'll have a special public comment after the Q&A of the last candidate.
Yes.
Great.
This would be fun.
So tell your friends.
Or yourself.
And then the appointment will be on the 22nd.
And then again, just to clarify for the public, so this would be an appointment for 1 year, and then this candidate, whoever is appointed, would then run for an additional term of 4 years?
4 or 2, should they
Yeah.
choose to run? There's no
Should they choose
obligation.
to run? Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. It's a minimum of a 1-year commitment.
They would just be fulfilling Trustee Davis's tenure.
Not correct, but Jeff's tenure would have been,
2 years.
oh, yeah. Okay, I got you. You're right.
So the appointments would run until the next regular election. In which the person who wins these seats with the most amounts of votes would be assigned Trustee Davis's old vacancy, which would be until the 2026 election.
Which I had a question on, because when we had the last election, 3 of us we ran unopposed. So how did we decide who had the 2-year?
All 3, you, Trustee Craker, and Trustee Davis had 4-year terms.
Yeah.
Your previous position before the election, you were filling
Austin's.
Trustee Davis or Trustee Lashman's seat.
Yeah.
So to restate, everybody had a 4-year term. Jeff's, because he resigned, is going to get cut short.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
instead of this seat
Okay,
being filled until the end of his normal term, it's only going to run until this next election, which is April of 2024.
Right.
And then whoever fills that seat has no obligation to run in April of 2024, but that seat will then be open for that election. So we'll have 5 open
Yeah.
positions in
Why
April
are we doing it like that?
2024. Apparently that's what the CRS says.
I think yeah.
And so then when all those positions are open, then the 2-year term will go to whoever receives the fewer votes.
Yes.
Okay,
Before-
not tied to any positions, right?
I know, I see it with the asterisk.
It's just the fourth place winner of the 2024 election gets the shortest term.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
But whoever does take that seat for a year is in a great position
Oh,
in
yeah.
that election.
And
They
they'll
want to
love
run
it.
again.
They'll love it.
Cool.
Great.
Was there any other direction that you're looking for?
No, you guys covered it. No.
Any suggestions or critiques of our direction? Like, since you, I think, have both thought about it more than we have in the last few minutes. Any other ideas or suggestions to improve the process?
Nope, we've been talking this over, so
Cool.
those are kind of the options we came up with.
Well, thank you. I thought that was super helpful.
Great.
And then we've moved 4B from this meeting for the next meeting. So the next item on our agenda is item 4C, Columbine Park Construction HRV System Consideration.
All right. Bevan, you want to introduce this one?
Sure.
Yes, you can step up to the podium. We're good to have
Or
a
have a
seat
seat.
over there.
Have a seat. My name is Bevan Harris. I'm the building inspector and code enforcement for Silverton and San Juan County. I'm here to talk about the proposal for having HRV installed in the Columbine bathrooms. For those of you who don't know what it is, basically it stands for heat recovery ventilation. And as we build more airtight homes, there's less natural air flowing through the house, like a leaky home. So it's imperative that in order to maintain health and humidity levels that are safe, we need to circulate fresh air from outside and bring it into the structure and move stale air from inside and out. So what IRC, right now we're in 2015 IRC. And in 2018, which is where we're going to go to next, it's required that homes and structures meet a minimum ACH, which is air change per hour. And that is a 3.0. I'm getting more technical than I want to, but essentially it's important that as we're building airtight homes, we keep the inside air healthy. And the best way to do that is circulate fresh air from outside. So what a HRV does is it's a heat transfer. So in order to not be heating cold air the whole time, it brings in the cold air and it runs it by a heat exchanger. So it takes the ambient air in the house and runs it by the cold air that comes in before it emits it into the home space or living space. And what that does is it helps reduce your energy costs. It brings the air temperature closer to the inside temperature. And this being bathrooms, is even more imperative that we get that, circulate that stale air and humid air out. So that's something that HRV does effectively, is it removes humidity as well. There's widespread question and dispute of whether or not use HRV or ERV. ERV is energy recovery ventilation, and that maintains a higher level of humidity. It's good in certain areas. In the case with bathrooms and higher humidity, you want to get that humidity out. If it were a standard home that was more in the dry and cold area, an ERV can be effective. But for public restrooms that are going to have showers and sinks, and it's going to be important that we have that. So my recommendation is that we incorporate this HRV system. It was not instituted in the initial bid. there would be a need for some kind of ventilation, whether they're air fans in the bathrooms. This encompasses it all. So it includes fans in the bathroom and fans for the rest of the building. The other areas that are important to consider are the food concession areas that are going to have, air and moisture from cooking, and also air in the garage area, machines. So it's just going to help not only maintain cleaner air, it's also going to meet the IRC code standards for 2018, which could come into play for us in the county by the fall.
Great.
Any questions? Anything that I can help clear up?
So this bid is for the entire building?
Entire building. Yep. So bathrooms, food concession area, garage, office area upstairs, and the front visitors area.
And this was the most cost-effective quote that we've gotten?
I can't speak to that. I'd have to talk to Brian Anderson or those that have the quotes at hand. Yeah. I know from experience, I know more recently a private home that had fewer fans had a higher quote than that. But beyond that, I can't speak. I know we are looking at other ways to reduce costs. We were dealing with it on today in regards to one of the decks and water runoff to minimize that from landing on the concession area below. And one of the proposed methods for dealing with that is going to save quite a bit of money, thousands, by utilizing a simpler and still effective method for redirecting water off the deck so it doesn't land on people below.
Is the town contracting with Kendall Mountain Air, or is is this essentially a subcontract?
Yes.
Subcontractor, yep.
So we're really just approving the dollar amount.
Correct.
Yeah, and we might be able to recover the cost. We don't know. So we just wanted to put it all in front of you because we won't know until the very end. At the next finance meeting, we are going to be presenting, not this one, but the May finance, we'll be presenting on where we're at to date with Columbine Park. And how, like what we've spent versus what we've submitted. And so that'll give us kind of a better idea, but we're doing that right now. So so this would be an additional, we want you to think of this as an additional cost right now. Just so that if we don't recover those costs in the areas that we're anticipating, that we are covered with your permission to spend that money.
I think cost overruns are inevitable. It's not, this is just isn't a little one. It's pretty big one.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I don't know what was estimated on the initial bid for ventilation, because we're utilizing, a in-floor heating and electric cove upstairs. There is no air mitigation system. So we would require that fans are going to be in place. So it's not an added 30K cost. That would be offset by whatever the cost would be to put an air, retrieval system in there, bathroom fans. So, I don't know what that cost would be, but that might help you understand the difference between the two. Do you know that in 2018, when 2018 IRC goes into effect, all new homes are going to require installation of some kind of HRV and ERV to maintain that ACH level of 3.0 at 50 pascals. So,
I'm not questioning that.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone up here is. My only question was for the $30,000 price tag attached to this. And per our common practice, did we get any additional quotes? And if this is, if this individual or this company is working directly for Brian, then does that even come into our purview?
It doesn't.
Doesn't.
Do our purchasing policy now.
So we're just gonna go with this.
Did we have something in the agreement with Brian about awarding like, I think he has autonomy to award subcontracts. But I was just wondering if we need to hold ourselves accountable to anything that's also in that contract. Like, do we have any review requirements or anything like that?
I don't know. I don't recall it on my head.
You know, that-
yeah, I'm, it's above my pay grade.
Autonomy. Well, I like a ventilated bathroom.
I just,
Good.
I
It goes.
mean, I imagine that it was already a pretty expensive building.
Yep.
And I mean, ventilation was included in the original plan. I mean, whether it was just basic, ceiling or, escape fans, but yeah, it's just.
Another consideration is also to keep in mind that the HRVs and ERVs are a lot more efficient than your standard house bath fan. So they are going to retain heat in the building. So there'll be a reduced, it's 50 to 60% efficiency rate.
Oh, good. Okay. So we're gonna spend less on heating at the end of the day. Okay.
By utilizing that fan system versus just a standard bathroom, blower fan.
Good. Okay.
But it's
We like
not
that.
it's not less on heating overall. It's less on heating compared to if we installed a standard, like bathroom fan. This is not a heating efficiency tool. This is an air circulation tool that has the added mechanical function of like heating air instead of like creating more cold air to heat, is my understanding. Like it doesn't do anything for heat efficiency.
Correct. It ultimately will lead to reduced heating costs because you won't be heating as much. You won't be heating cold air that's coming in. You're going to be heating,
temperate air.
Correct.
Yeah. No, that's good. Well, and I think, Jim covered my question actually.
Well, I think too, you're hearing from 3 finance committee members where we're just saying, well, isn't there another bid? Don't we have something to compare it to? That's typically where we go. So I think that's kind of just the question of like, not that there's anything wrong with this bid, but we don't have anything to compare it to. I appreciate your anecdotal evidence, Devin, but I guess that's just, I have no problem with the rationale for why we would need something like this. I think it's just a question of like, can we get 2 bids, 3? But we don't have.
And then my understanding is he's already purchased it, and if you all had said no, he was able to use it on another building. Or.
Yeah, reapply the funds to.
That's why it came kind of in this.
Yeah.
Like honestly, it came to us on Thursday.
Yeah.
And I can't find anything in here that would talk about his subcontractor.
So,
But I'm just.
but if we go ahead and approve this and we don't say, we're not able to save the costs on the rest of the building and other places of the building. We didn't budget for it in for this year. Will we be able to? How will we pay for it, Gloria?
That would come out of our fund balance.
Okay.
That we have right now in our general fund.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And the only thing here that I found in the contract, any modification to the project budget in Exhibit C shall be approved by principal in writing. And any approved additional expenses shall be the sole responsibility of the principal, we being the principal.
Mhm.
Clayton, I saw you on mute. You're gonna give us something?
I was gonna say exactly what Gloria said, and that is, if you want to add it, it won't be a violation of purchasing policy. Of course, that's your prerogative if you want to get bids on that system, but that you have the authority to amend and add expenses to that contract as long as the amendment is done in writing and the board passes it.
Well, I certainly don't want to do anything to slow the process down.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to look at the bottom line.
Plug it up.
No.
Yeah, I don't know what the offset cost would be if we what the difference would be if we went with a standard mechanical blower fans per bathroom and per room. I know that we are trying to reduce costs in other areas where it either doesn't make sense or we have a better an alternative method for achieving a similar or better goal.
Like one area that we did that was the information desk, instead of buying an information desk, which was like ridiculous amount. We're just building it into the building. We're just framing it out and it'll be a lot cheaper that way. So like little things like that, I know are going to give us cost savings. I just don't know how much yet.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right.
I wanted to express support for the more updated system, especially as we move to the 2018 standards. Instead of, the standard blower fans, because of what you're saying, Bevan, that increased efficiency with the ventilation. But I think what I'm hearing and what I'm curious about as well is just if there's if we have the option to and are legally allowed, and if it's an option in terms of timing and availability from a different subcontractor to do this same work that you're proposing, but just at a different cost. And if that different cost was going to be, I don't know what the threshold is for the rest of the board, but I would say somewhere between if it's a $2,000 difference, that doesn't seem super significant. But if it was like a $10,000 difference, that's significant. So I don't know. That's kind of where, but I am in support of the more modern ventilation system.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I know that a bid for a private home that was built here in town that had a HRV, it was a higher cost with a smaller system and less fans. And it was well over 30. I know that the owner of the company is, I believe, from here. So I think he's got a vested interest in being fair and reasonable. And I think it's partly why Brian uses them. I will note that this system is a lot healthier. It's partly why the push to enforce the standard is because there's so many toxins in the air that both from just breathing to the chemicals that are in some building materials, if they're not super green. So circulating that air out has proven to be a lot healthier for inhabitants. And it's another factor that I should have clarified at the beginning. And it's very critical in moist environments like bathrooms and kitchens. So of which both exist in this structure.
It sounds to me like the board's in support of the HRV system and making this modification. I think practically, if it's possible to find out if there were additional bids,
Sure.
This was at a bid, or maybe there just was nobody else available in the time frame they needed. But just having a little more context would be helpful. But would we be comfortable approving this subject to staff discretion that sufficient diligence was done to obtain this bid, and if not, request for additional bids? Is that something the staff feels comfortable with? So if you ask those questions that we just asked and you find out the answers and it seems reasonable, then good to go. And if it sounds like they didn't really ask anybody else and we have the time to get a couple more bids, then
Mhm.
we pump the brakes for a second and it comes back.
Yeah. that seems-
That's good with me, especially. I don't want to say, no, we need to, go out and ask for 10 other bids and then, we're 6 months behind schedule. So yeah, if staff is comfortable with it, I think that's
Yeah, I echo Tyler. Keeping the timeline high, like cost is important, but the timeline also is important because it's gonna be important to start using this building.
Now that I,
Mhm.
Is that too much gray?
Well, I think that would be okay, but I would like a vote on it,
Yeah.
just so that we do have that in writing according to our contract. If we were to go, so you can make that motion with the caveat that staff would be doing additional due diligence in order to
be down for that.
start that.
So the motion would be the board approves this request subject to the staff finding this bid reasonable given the circumstances.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Motion approved unanimous.
Thank you, Bevan.
All right, the next item on our agenda is approval of the consent agenda.
Can you promote John Sites to panelist? I just want to highlight something in your have a significant check in there for our snow removal services and wanted to just highlight the fact that we have been contracting out for snow removal and our budget for our streets budget is going to probably need an amendment here soon. John, did you want to speak?
Yes, I just wanted to bring up that you all might have noticed in your accounts payable perusals for this AP run that we've got some significant snow removal invoices. This happened in 2019, 2020 as well. We still are under our streets maintenance budget, but we expect that we're gonna, even with some cutbacks, that we're gonna have to adjust, juggle, and potentially amend our streets budget because of the amount of snow we're moving and the amount of expense it's taking to get it off the streets. We still have a long way to go, but I think as far as expenses to subcontractors, we're well over halfway. Obviously, there are a lot of snow piles that still need to be moved so that we can get the streets dried out for proper grading. But it's worth mentioning that we're taking a hit there this year. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to field them.
Removal is an essential service here.
The check stood out to me when I signed it, but it's one of those years and got to keep it clear. We got to make sure that fire trucks, ambulances and electrical trucks can get places. So
It's true. Not being able to see the backup for that check. Is this for a cumulative period of time or is this just for a 2-week period or?
That was for 3 months.
For 3 months?
Yes.
That's a little bit easier to swallow.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The finance committee's on a roll today.
Yeah, we're going at it. And then I do have a question, knowing major thoroughfares and streets and intersections in town, where are we focusing our main efforts in snow removal?
At this point, we're focusing on hauling snow piles. After we got the main areas cleared, obviously Green Street and Blair, we would clear around the school, post office, hospital. Some of these piles with 2 trucks and a loader can take a day or a half a day to move 1 pile of snow. We have so much snow. So that's where a lot of our expense is going. But the focus would be on after we get past the areas like the post office and the school and the library, then we're focusing on the areas that have the most residents. And that's typically going to be Reese Street would be the next one to focus on. Obviously, most of Blair Street is already clear because we plowed at the center. And then we would move out from Reese to Snowden and Mineral. And then, in the northeast part of town, up on Mineral and Cement up there, we don't have a lot of residences and we have a lot of other areas to put snow. So we don't do as much hauling up there.
So we're operating this with 2 trucks and 1 loader, correct?
3 trucks, 2
Uh-huh.
loaders.
There we go.
Some of the contract work was loader work to load trucks. Also a bulldozer, a local
Perfect.
contractor. And these are all local contractors. We have priced bringing in outside contractors, but it's not as cost effective. And obviously we want to keep the money in town if we can.
Cool.
Yeah.
Those are my questions. That's good.
Thank you very much.
Keep it going, man.
You bet. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the consent agenda prior to approval?
Need to hand all new transplants. Here are mud boots and here's your resiliency plan checklist.
Right.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Trustee Grant.
Yes.
Trustee Parker.
Yes.
Trustee Garrett.
Yes.
Trustee George.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Martin.
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes.
Motion passes next.
Thank you very much. Staff reports, next item on our agenda.
So I just have one thing to mention with staff reports. The EPA will be working with contractors this summer, driving through town with large trucks for a remediation project that they're going to be doing. And they would like to hold a meeting with the elected officials on May 10th. And so this would be a joint meeting with town and county. And this would be at the county's meeting since last year that we had them come to our meeting. And so I know I had kind of put that date out there for a possible retreat, but now that we are looking for another trustee, that retreat will probably be more in June. But if that date is still available, Willie and I are working together to make that meeting happen.
Was that a daytime? Was that daytime meeting? Evening meeting? Can't remember.
Does it say? May 10th.
I think it's a day. No, I think it's an evening. Yeah, I was thinking it was an evening because we would most likely be available in the evening. So, okay.
They're going to be driving through town with lots and lots and lots of big trucks.
Yeah, and we actually had a great meeting with them, an organizational meeting to talk about the timings that they would be like coming through, talking about the fact that we have a lot of pedestrians from 11 to 3, just kind of some logistical stuff. And they want to kind of touch that with you guys. This wouldn't happen until probably September. Like some of their staging stuff would happen earlier, but the actual hauling of the material wouldn't happen until September.
I'm more interested in what Anthony brought to us at the last finance meeting.
Yep.
And making sure that we have something prepared maybe to show them.
Yep, we're working on that.
Awesome.
As well.
Great.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions on staff reports? Great job, staff, as always. Thank you. Committee reports. Do we have any committee meetings?
No, I left that one on there. You can
Great.
scratch it.
Trustee reports.
For fellow board members and anybody in the public, the variety of partners are posting a health fair, the 365 health fair. It used to be 9 News Health Fair, so it's been rebranded. So it used to be 9 News Health Fair. Come on out. It's gonna be Saturday, April 29th at the school gym. So folks can get very low cost screening. So talking about healthcare and access to healthcare, this is a great one-stop shop to get some checkups, to get some blood work done, do some screenings. And yeah, so come on out on Saturday, April 29th from 8 to 12 at the school gym. And if you want to come hang out with some lovely citizens in our community, we're doing lunch now at the senior centers at noon on Wednesdays. So if you care about helping, if you just want to come chat with some of our really special folks that have lots of great stories to share, come on over at noon. It's open if you'd like to come hang out or help set up or clean up or have a bowl of soup. And that's a great partnership with Manna Soup Kitchen, the Area Agency on Aging, and the Public Health Department.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, that sounds like it's it for trustee reports. The next item is continued business 9A development agreement for Silverton Development LLC. Now Mineral Creek Homes, Inc. as supplemental to ordinance 2022-12 and 2022-14, which I'm conflicted out of discussing, so I'll be leaving the room now because I have a personal interest in the project.
So this development agreement focuses on ensuring that the town will have infrastructure plans by the developer prior to selling off their lots. This is kind of the main reason we did this development agreement, to ensure that we would have infrastructure prior to things being sold. So we're not going to have it installed prior, but we will have all their plans prior and engineered plans. I know John has met with the engineers on the specifics of the request. And then the rezoning of these lots was contingent upon this agreement. Silverton Development is going from an LLC to a corporation and changing their name. And I actually would like to make an amendment in the first paragraph, starting on line 3 of the agreement, that states Mineral Creek Homes, a Delaware limited liability. Can that be changed to corporate, previously known as Silverton Development? So I just want to change that. This was kind of a very last minute change that we found out they were doing this for tax purposes. So we were just changing that first line. But this is something that we've been negotiating since November, and feel good finally about this agreement. So. Any questions?
I think for me, I just really wanted to hear from John and Gloria and Lucy that based on all the discussions, you feel comfortable with this development agreement. You feel like it's a good position for the town to be in regards to just protecting what this looks like into the future, making sure that street grading and plans for pipes and plans for various things that could be installed over in this development are kind of in place appropriately. I know that's something we talked a lot about previously. It's just making sure that the town has some protection here in this role as this happens. Again, I'm excited about these options happening, but just want to make sure that you all feel comfortable with where the development agreement landed. So any comments, feedback, or concerns?
I'd be glad to speak to the basics of the infrastructure. The purpose of this agreement is to protect the town, as you're probably aware. And we don't have a final design from their engineers yet. I have been in communications with them on a couple of Zoom meetings so far, letting them know what our expectations are, what my concerns are, the process that they're going to be going through. I'm sure that they are familiar with this type of process. But essentially, I feel that having them lay out the entire plan en masse for all their blocks before they break ground on anything is the point. So that we're not going to have problems with grading. We're not going to have problems with drainage. We know where the snow is going to go. We know where their sidewalks are going to be in relation to our transmission line, which is close to their property. Of all those things, to me, it's an insurance policy for the town. And as my position on staff, I'm comfortable with it. And I think it was a great suggestion by by CPS, our planner.
Great,
For that, John.
thanks.
And I tried to get them to install all the infrastructure before they sold one lot, but that's really not feasible. So we're doing the plans first. Ask for the moon
May as well.
in the stratosphere.
I have a couple notes that I took regarding the width of the sidewalks, depth of the concrete, assurances that all this will be followed throughout the entirety of the project. Specs on the gutters, slope of the driveways with regards to snow and water. Distance between fire hydrants, locations. All these, I'm assuming, are going to be met through the planning process, correct?
That's correct. They'll be required to meet all of our development standards for the entire development. So, and this is also a good opportunity that we're getting several blocks designed, not developed at once, but designed at once instead of just one. And one of my big things here is drainage. I wanted to make sure that the drainage is integrated because that's the very end of town where all the water is going to end up. And I think it's advantageous that we can actually see it all in one place. But to answer your question directly, they will be required to meet our development standards.
Okay. And then you did mention water. I'm going to mention water on another side. With regards to hydraulic testing, knowing that that's on the far edge of town, that we're going to have to get water over there and have water consistent, water pressure consistent on that edge of town. Have we done all those tests?
The water pressure is very high.
On that end?
It's very high. Because it's a much lower elevation than where it comes out of the water plant, out of the tanks. So it's actually the water down in that part of town needs to be reduced. We typically recommend pressure reducing valves, point of use at every residence because of the high pressure down there.
And then this infrastructure is being built in with the assumption of our last, one or two work sessions ago with regards to our overall water capacity for town.
And we won't know that until May, our build out plan. And we're always concerned about that. So.
Now, and I know one of the issues back in November was that there was, and we had public feedback about this, is there were no plans, there were no sketches, nothing. This is what, 4 or 5 months later, you still haven't seen anything, John?
Oh, I have, but they have not submitted an application for anything yet.
Correct.
They have just shown me draft sketches that they have requested input on. So they basically, everything that they've shown me thus far, everything will meet our development standards, which is hydrant spacing, sidewalk design, concrete thickness, street design, all that type thing, sewer, water specifications. That's all pretty standard engineering.
Perfect. No, I just wanted to ask the questions.
Sure.
Thank you.
You bet.
Now, I'm trying to think of how to ask this question. Recognizing that the infrastructure won't all be put in before any lots are sold. How does the situation play out where the infrastructure does not get completed? with the plans that they have. Like if lots are sold, but then this entity doesn't end up completing the whole package. Is that a problem for the town? Is that a concern? Does my question make sense?
To me, it's not, because the town can require the installation of infrastructure in its right of ways, water, sewer, sidewalks, and streets to our specifications.
Right.
And if we like them, and if our engineers that review these plans like them, then they can be required to maintain those standards for as many years as we want. And we might want to change them. You know, if they're not fully developed in 20 years, we might have better technology. We might want to do something different in 20 years. But those are our rights of way, and this is our infrastructure. So we can have it designed to our specification at any time.
That's right. And I guess I'm answering my own question. Like there are specifications. So any future developer, whether it's this or another, or individual property owners or whatever, have to meet our specifications for these improvements for streets, gutters, sidewalks, etc.
Yes, and we have basic design standards, but when you're talking about several blocks that are being proposed to be developed, we would like them to be integrated so that we don't have problems with drainage in particular. We don't have problems with sewer sloping, manhole locations. All of those things are going to be specific to a particular development, if you will, and not necessarily just to a standard.
So what a buyer is getting if they choose to purchase one of these lots is the completion of the engineering plans for infrastructure. And what the town is getting is the integration of those plans so that the plans for infrastructure relate to a block of lot or a group of lots and can create some consistency as this big bulk of infrastructure goes in.
Yes.
That's my understanding of how this contract kind of works between the town, the developer, and then the future buyers. And so the future buyers are, I mean, it's to their advantage to develop their lots to the plans that are engineered and presented to the town as is. Is there ever a case that a buyer purchases a lot and then that lot gets sort of taken out of the development group and owned by an individual, that they would have the right to like develop something differently or outside of that group of engineered plans? I can't think of a reason why they would want to do that, but is that problematic in any way? Or do we hold all of those lots kind of accountable to those engineering plans?
They would be held accountable to our benefit.
Yeah,
to
exactly.
Our benefit.
Yeah. Right. That's
and I think I can weigh in here quickly and answer a lot of these questions. Kind of how this works. If you look at 211B, this is the language where we tried to split the baby with the developers, kind of between the lot by lot development versus what Gloria had suggested, which is a global development or infrastructure, which understandably is going to price out any developer, right? They can't create infrastructure for that much property before they can sell one home. It just doesn't make any sense. It's cost prohibitive. And so the way, I was told to write this paragraph was to split the baby and make it a block sectional type requirement. And so if you look at that language, what this is saying is before you can even get a permit to build a house, anybody and under this agreement encompasses those exhibits with the block drawings, exhibit A and B to those ordinances attached to this document, that you have to have an entire sectional plan, the infrastructure for the whole section, which includes that whole block by definition in the agreement. And that not only do you have to have that infrastructure, but you have to have an engineered drawing which indicates the proposed termination points of all improvements to every contiguous section to that infrastructure. So not only are you going to get infrastructure for that entire section, but you're going to get to see the requirement and where those sections are going to connect to the contiguous sections so that you don't have this piecemealed infrastructure, so that it all kind of flows. And that includes all the improvements. And then if you go back up to the definition of improvement, you're looking at everything that we've been talking about, which is the water mains, the service lines, sewer lines, stormwater detention, retention, collection facilities, road improvements, not limited to surface treatment, base, curbs, gutters, sidewalks, all to be constructed within the subject property according to the town code. And so I think I and staff feel very comfortable that this requirement takes care of those big infrastructure issues by requiring that contiguity between developing these sections as a whole, and then making sure that each contiguous section will connect seamlessly as the development gets built out. And so that was really the purpose of that, all that language. Of course, the developers want lot by lot. We wanted the whole thing. And so this is where we came up in the middle, which is going to basically be block by block.
I'll make a motion. There's no more discussion. I make a motion to move that the development agreement dated April 10th, 2023 between Mineral Creek Homes Incorporated, formerly known as Sultan Development LLC, and the town of Silverton be approved and shall be executed and recorded on the subject properties in the San Juan County Clerk and Recorder's Office within 30 days of approval.
I'll second.
Yes.
Trustee Parker,
Yes.
Trustee Weiner,
Yes.
Trustee George.
Yep.
Mayor Pro Tem Barr.
Yes.
And Mayor Pro Tem has recused himself, giving us 3 yeas and 1 recusal.
Bring on.
Yeah.
The next item of continued business is 9B, follow-up discussion on development constraints and proposed work plan.
Okay, so the memo in your packet outlines a work plan to solutions to our current development constraints that we identified at the March 26th work session. It covers staff's proposed actions for each area of concern, including unmanageable deadlines for staff and current code, wetland policies, the need for a planning director, affordable housing, infrastructure concerns, and a code rewrite. This is a piecemeal approach and does not address all of our concerns, but it's honestly our best start that we could think of to get us in the direction of aligning with our master plan while still accepting development applications. And I'm requesting board's feedback or direction to pursue this work plan.
It's a very aggressive work plan. Are
It
you
is.
sure that you feel good about the workload that you're proposing?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Spotlight's on you.
Yes, and already in that work plan, we had a pass-through policy that was going to be presented tonight, and that is delayed, but that is going to happen. And so I would like to set an aggressive plan and see what we can accomplish out of it. Because we do need these tools in place to move forward, and we want to address kind of all of those concerns in some respect, not to the extent that we had originally proposed, but to an extent that we think would get us a step further and make it a little easier on development here and in line with our master plan.
I mean, to me, this seems like a huge effort on the part of staff to sort of take the feedback and pivot and adapt. And I hope you are still feeling supported by the board in the direction we all want to go as well. And so I think I would just encourage you as you continue to see creative options or partial approaches, like I'm very open to hearing that. And I really appreciate the work that went into this to kind of take these key priorities and say, well, what can we work on now? And so I think we're just really trusting you that this does feel feasible and doable.
And that's something,
and it's exciting.
we know it's a big chunk and an aggressive timeline. But we see the need for this to happen as soon, like all of these to happen as soon as we can, to make it easier and to align. So while it might be a bit of a scramble these next couple of months for us, I've passed this along with all of staff's input. And this is kind of where we went. Believe me, I was a lot more aggressive.
A little bit. They're all things that are going to be tools to make making changes easier, and they're the things that our staff finds most important, but also at the same time most feasible to address. Like there are obviously other things we'd like to address sooner, but these are kind of the things we've identified that we can kind of start on right away, and feeling good about starting on them right away.
And we do have some more stuff that we want to work on with affordable housing. They're more complex. I think we started outlining a couple of them and realized it would take up the entire memo to do so. And so this is kind of the quick and dirty. So this is what we could potentially tackle right away. And then as those other initiatives kind of get fleshed out, then we can bring those to you as well. But one of those is developing on single lot, and we went into a rabbit hole on subdivisions and what is happening currently. And so we're still researching those things, but these are the items. Like the ADU is an item that we feel we could address soon and within our current code.
I think too, I just want to call it for the community, for whoever's listening now or going to look on YouTube, like this is the staff and the board attempt to listen to feedback and be responsive and thread the needle around a variety of sometimes competing interests. And so I just think this is such a great example of some compromises, some steps in the right direction. There's a lot of wins in here. And if anybody made it to the packet of page 79 of the, I see that. So I'm just putting that up for the community. We're 2 hours into a meeting, we're on page 80, but like we're listening to you.
I'm going to ask the same question I've asked in our several meetings and work sessions. Are you sure you don't want to loosen up this timeline?
Well, I mean, honestly, if we could have done a moratorium, we would have done a moratorium and we stopped everything and got this done. So this is kind of our next step in figuring out on how to work around with what we have. And it is aggressive, but it's also kind of like our only option.
Which makes you guys awesome. So thank you.
I feel like we're all really motivated to get things done quickly, but also really intentionally. And we've had a lot of these conversations. And so I think we're ready to make things happen. And this is just the beginning and we want to keep going. So these are our first steps.
Love it. Enthusiasm.
Also, if a timeline is missed, nothing immediately implodes.
Oh, not at all.
These are self-imposed goals. Yeah.
Won't be like the Muppets running around.
They are, and these might, shift like.
It's gonna be fun.
Like
Good.
the first one tonight shifts, but but at least we have a goal.
This sets some priorities.
Yeah.
I think based on the total scope of the things that we've talked about as top priorities, like these ones definitely stand out as, like, I don't think any of them are completely straightforward, but they stand out as the most straightforward. And like the rabbit hole that, the discussion went down around single family lot build or single lot builds. There were just so many variables that need to get figured out. It's a complicated topic. And these ones all seem like, wetlands are complicated too, but this is an idea of like how to protect them while continuing to consider.
And I know the board had asked for a jurisdictional wetland policy, and we're kind of going to do a little bit more robust than that here, because jurisdictional wetlands are changing all of the time right now. So we're gonna kind of thread the needle on that one as well, but realizing that, you know, as they're changing, as we're writing policy, what we could write that would maybe last a little longer than what is currently being thrown around.
Yeah, I think that's great.
I think it's incredible. I echo everything that you guys just said. And if there becomes kind of like a snowballing effect of like missed deadlines, or I hope that the staff, I think our meetings have been really productive and the communication is really clear and direct. And so as we go forward, if, you know, I want to express support for the staff kind of giving us real updates, real honest updates about, you know, if this works, if it doesn't work, you know, we don't know what's on your desks or what's coming, you know, through the door. And so giving us a sense of like, yeah, this can work. You know, this is a piecemeal approach. It's maybe not the ideal, but it's working, or this was our piecemeal approach and these aren't working and this looks like it's going to be a longer process or something's kind of interfering. I would appreciate those updates too.
Will do.
Is there any other input that would be helpful?
Just that you guys are on board with this work plan, basically.
Exceeds expectations.
Great.
Yeah.
So
I'll
cool.
let you go.
Okay, great. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is new business 9C, resolution 2023-06, a resolution of the town of Silverton, Colorado, amending resolution 2022-14, adopting a remote attendance policy to provide terms and conditions for limited telephone and electronic participation by members of the Board of Trustees at regular and special meetings.
And this agenda item was brought up at the Personnel Ordinance Committee on March 16th, addressing the fact that our recently adopted trustee remote attendance policy did not specify how many meetings a trustee could attend remotely before triggering an evaluation. It seemed like it would be every time they attended remotely. So this is the attempt, and I hope I got it right. The P&O committee suggested 2 regular meetings are allowed. And if a trustee requires more than this amount, they must appeal to the board. And I've included track changes in the policy that you can review my edits.
Great. Yes, the idea was that we weren't strictly adhering to the prior policy. It was like, if you could read it one way to say that every single Zoom meeting that we attended, we needed to actually start the meeting by requesting permission for the person attending remotely to be remote and have the whole board approve it. And obviously, you know, we've had a series of meetings with people dialing in from wherever, and we haven't been doing that. So this will allow us to have a more practical, but still, I think, responsible attendance policy.
And so we just have to readopt this resolution this year. This was a fun practice. I didn't know how to readopt resolutions, but figured it out. Yes, people don't think that's fun.
We could call it sexy.
I
like
love that you think it's.
Call everything sexy.
Are we ready for a
The,
motion?
the individual who's zooming in, I remember in our discussion, either that individual contacts you or contacts the board.
Right, so they contacted me.
Right.
And or Matt.
Right.
So it's either one of us they contact and let us know they're zooming in. And then after 2 times that they're consecutive meetings, regular meetings,
Correct.
then the board can check in at that time and review their attendance. So it'd be a month, I think they decided.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 2023-06, a resolution of the town of Silverton, Colorado, amending resolution 2022-14, adopting a remote attendance policy to provide terms and conditions for limited telephone and electronic participation by members of the Board of Trustees at regular and special meetings.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Yes.
Trustee Harper,
Yes.
trustee Aaron,
Yes.
trustee George.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. That was the last item on our agenda. So now we'll move to our closing public comment. We do not have anyone in person. If you're on Zoom and would like to make a public comment, please click the raise hand button. Being none, we'll close public comment. The time's 9:06 PM and I adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much. Everybody have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.